Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I add another piece to my collection of Beatrix Potter's study series. Now this piece, as you can tell, I've already drawn it out ahead of time, and I'm using a kneaded eraser to kind of knock back those pencil lines just a little bit. I don't want them quite that dark before I ink it, and this is a little bit different type of a piece. As you can tell, this is a floral piece, but it is also a water piece. So we have some water lilies going on here. And I did finally get, if you've watched these before, you know I've been wanting some brown ink. The brown ink finally came back in stock, so I was able to get that, and I will list that down below. It is Noodler's ink, and it is called Polar Brown. So love the ink. And this is the normal Fude de Mannen pen, the Sailor Fude de Mannen pen that I've used in the past. I loved it so much, I went ahead and purchased another Fude de Mannen pen, and I wanted one that had a black casing, but I could only get navy blue, and that's fine, because what I've done with this one is I have put the brown ink in it, since the pen is brown, and then the other one being navy blue, I went ahead and loaded that one with my black ink, so I can switch back and forth, and I'll know what's inside, and hopefully not get confused. So what I'm doing here is, and this looks a little bit darker, I will have to say, the ink looks darker on camera than it does in person. It's lighter in person. However, when I put the watercolor on, it did look a bit darker than what I had hoped, but I am pleased with this brown ink. I do like this brown ink. So what I'm doing here is I'm just doing the thick and thin lines. I'm adding those weighted lines in that she did in her piece. I did do something a little bit differently, however, than what she did in hers. Now the flowers, you can see I'm outlining the flowers. I'm going over my lines and I'm outlining the flowers with the black ink. I am thinking that she probably left them in pencil and did not actually ink that part in. I could be wrong. I'm just going by what it looks like online and looking at the description. And of course, all of my references come from the Victoria and Albert Museum website, and I will link that down below. They have quite a collection of Beatrix Potter works, so you can take a look and you can find my piece on there. Since I don't own the piece and I'm just using it for study, I'm not going to post it side by side with mine, but you can find it on there. They do have that piece on there, and you can take a look and see what you think. But I think that she left these in pencil, just the flowers, and then did everything else in ink. So I'm going to put, as I have been doing in some of these, I really like the wash of tea on it. And the tea I'm using for this one, I can't remember the brand, but it is a blueberry green tea. I drink that every single day and it smells so good. And I accidentally dropped this bag on the floor, so I just used it for this. And I'm using Derwent Graphitint, and then I have my little cheat sheet at the side where I have swatched all of the colors. I have a round brush that's my size 8, and then I have my size 2, and these are from the Royal and Langnickel Zen series, and I have 2 cups of water, one for cleaning my brush and one for mixing. We're going to start with a little meadow here, and oh yes, and I do have my microfiber cloth over to the side. Now, I put the tea on there first to kind of give it a nice tint, so I'm not just starting with a stark white background. It gives a little bit of an aged look, and I put, I think, just 2 coats. Usually I do 3, but with this tea I only did 2, and I put it on, I let it dry, and then I add another coat on. So the first technique I'm going to do here is put down the meadow on some of the lily pads, not all of them, but some of the lily pads. This is going to be our base. And instead of mixing my colors in my well, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to be, or rather my palette, I'm not going to be mixing colors there. I'm going to mix them right on the paper. So I'm going to layer them, or as some people say, I'm going to glaze them. So these were lily pads that had more of a yellow green to them. So I'm putting the meadow down first because it has a nice yellowy green to it. And now I'm going to go to slate green. And slate green has actually, in my opinion, more of a blue green. It's kind of a teal, but this goes well by itself underneath colors or on top of colors. So I'm going to paint some of the lily pads with this slate green, and then I'm going to add it on top of some of the meadow lily pads. Not all of them. We're going to kind of go back and forth with some colors, and you'll see what I mean. So here, let's go ahead and put some on this one, and we're getting a different shade of green. So we had a very yellowy green, really too yellow, but when I put the slate green on top of it, it knocks that back a bit and it creates more of the green that we're looking for. And you can go back and forth with colors. So you see, as that is still wet, and I'm working with hot press paper, so that's going to allow me to move this color around a bit more. But you can go back and forth between that meadow and the slate green when things are still a little wet with that slate green, and you can create some more of the yellow green. So that's how I'm getting all of this variance in color in here. I'm going back and forth. But the meadow that was on to begin with, that had dried, and then when I put the slate green on top, then that layer is now wet, and I can come back and go back and forth and mix those colors together. So that is a technique that works really well if you don't want to mix over at the side and you want this look of colors just kind of blending together on your paper. I really like using this technique, but sometimes I like mixing over, on my palette. It just kind of depends on what I'm doing. So I'm going to keep working with these two colors, then I'll hop back on in a minute and talk about some more stuff that I'm doing. Another advantage of mixing on your paper instead of mixing to the side, you can see I have the meadow down, I'm putting the slate green on top, but I'm not covering every area with that slate green. And that is because those were like little higher areas on the lily pad that were reflecting light, and doing this technique allows me to create those type of textures. Now we're going to add in some ocean blue, and you'll be able to tell that those greens are going to look much different on top of the meadow than the slate green did. So this is allowing me to get some more blue greens in my piece. So we're going to be using that color, and then you're going to see some autumn brown come in just a minute as well. And right here it is. So I'm going to be using that autumn brown on these leaves at the bottom. Now these are already dry. Painted them earlier. You didn't see the drying time in there. I'm adding them on top, and then what I'll be doing, you can see they're kind of strong, and I'm blending the edges out just a little bit, but you will see me reach over to the side. My brush will go off camera. There we go. And then I tap on it again. What I'm doing is I'm tapping the excess water off of my brush so that I can come back to that edge where I want the color to be weaker, to make it look as if I dropped that color in while everything was still wet. I had not done that. I wanted to put it on top, so that would give me a little bit more of a brown look. I wanted the blues and the greens underneath to work with that autumn brown, and then that was going to give me the shade that I needed. The autumn brown by itself is more red and not brown, so I wanted to create more of a reddish brown color, but I wanted it to blend in. Now, if you've never worked with Derwent Graphitint before, it is a very strange animal. I refer to anything that I can put water with as a watercolor, but this is not really a watercolor. This is graphite. And you'll notice that when I go over to the side to my palette to pick up color, I will swirl it. I swirl my brush. And the reason I swirl my brush quite a bit is because those little graphite pigments kind of separate in there, and you'll get areas of color and areas that look a little bit dirty, and that's just the graphite kind of separating out. So you have to be careful how you lay this down on your paper. You can put it on dry paper and you can have wet colors coming down on top of just your paper and blending them together. Or you can put, as I did, the meadow down and add colors on top. If you do that, you're going to need to make certain everything is completely dry. If you are putting colors down that are just slightly, the color on bottom is just slightly damp, it's almost completely dry, when you touch it with that wet brush, it will pull that graphite up off of the paper. So that's kind of frustrating. Now that can be to your advantage if you need to lift color. That works very well, but you really need to practice with these before you work on your masterpiece because they are completely different than regular watercolors. So you're going to see me using these techniques, going back and forth with these colors. I'm going to be quiet again, and then I'll hop back on in just a few minutes. I'm going to be finishing up this little leaf right here, and then I do have to apologize because right now you can tell things are crooked on here. And this was another day I had to quit and go do some other stuff, then come back the next day and work on it. And sometimes it's difficult for me to tell if my camera is straight, and my camera was not straight, so I do apologize about that. But eventually I figure it out and we go back straight again. You know, these things happen. So I'm working on putting some of the, I believe that's the ocean blue that I'm working with there, because I want this one to be a little bit different shade of green than some of the other lily pads. I don't know if you've noticed it yet. I have primarily used the meadow and the slate green on all of the other lily pads. And depending on which color I put down first, I can use those two colors. But if I put meadow down first and then add the slate green, or if I put the slate green down first and then add the meadow, I get different shades of green. It just depends on which pigment you're putting down first. Now, I'm starting on the part that I absolutely dreaded doing because I do not like doing water. Everybody says water is really hard to do, and I think it is. So when I picked this piece, I thought, oh, I hate doing water. I think I'll do this piece, because whatever you hate to do, you need to do it more. I had a college professor tell me that, and it happened to be my my advisor. He's my zoology teacher. So, and that's something you guys don't know about me. I actually have a degree in science. I was a pre-med student, so I have a degree in biology and I have a minor in art. And I thought at one point in time about going into medical illustration. So I think that's why I really like to do nature studies like this. But he told me, his advice was, if there's anything you hate doing, you need to do more of it. So took his advice. Thank you, Dr. Newton. I am now painting water, and I hate to paint water, but Beatrix Potter was just fantastic at doing this. And it's a very loose watercolor on this, very loose water, very loose representation of the water, but it works so well. And I don't know if you've picked up on it, but I'm a big fan of Beatrix Potter's art. So you're going to hear me praising her in everything, absolutely everything. Now, just above this area here, the little flower on this part, you'll see some blue, and you'll see that it has kind of bled out, and I have kind of that creeping look there that I don't really want. It's still slightly damp because remember, this is hot press paper, so I'm going to be able to move stuff around just a little bit more. So when I finish this area, while my brush is still slightly damp, I'm going to come up and I'm going to fix that area right there. Just a little bit of water on my brush, and it just blended it right out. I can do that because that area is still wet. Remember, if you need to fix it but it's almost dry, go ahead and let it dry, and then come back with your brush and then go back over it just a little bit. It'll move it around. You can add more color on top, but at least you won't lift it off and have a white spot, because that's really hard to fix. So I'm going to keep working with the water. I started with my dark colors because and that is a lily pad that I missed, so we're going to put some of that slate green on there. It was kind of hard to tell. She used lines, she used them well, but she uses broken lines, as I've talked about in other videos, and that allows the viewer to move through your piece and not be stopped by lines. So she does have some open spaces in her lines, and trying to read that when I was putting down these colors, it was really, really hard. I was kind of getting lost. It was like a puzzle, but we figure it out. But this side, the water is darker, so I'm assuming there are shadows. As we move to the left side, you're going to see me picking up some of the colors we've already used. Plus, I'm going to add in some russet because that is kind of a yellowish brown, and I'm going to need that in the water because there are some of these little stems and stuff that are coming up that are kind of dead looking, so we need that in the water. But things get lighter and we get a lot more color in the water as we move to the left. So I want you to notice how she is picking up all those reflections as she moves to the left side of the page. So I'm going to be quiet and let you watch me work. As you can see, my camera has switched a little bit as I promised that it would, and things are a tiny bit straighter than what they were previously. I'm still going to be working on the right side of the paper because I want that water to be a bit darker, and it had a lot of purple in it, so I thought the aubergine would be really good to add on top. Now I know it looks as if I'm going really quickly in this, and I'm sure you're saying there's no way that can be dry. I'm actually speeding this up as quickly as it will go because I'm a very slow worker on things. I think about stuff. I work a little bit slower than the average person, and so all of this has had time to dry. There's not a problem with that at all, because sometimes occasionally my dog will need something or a family member says something and I'm having to stop, and you don't see that off camera, but it slows me down and it causes everything to dry for me, so that works very well. So I'm adding the aubergine in to get some darker colors in. We're not going to add that everywhere. I'm going to use it sparingly, but on top of that dark indigo, it really brings out the depth, and you can tell this is darker, more shadowy, more murky water on this side. actually almost done with this piece. So we are going to work on the flowers themselves, and I decided to use Graphite Gray. Hers was a bit more blue than this, but I didn't really want to layer colors, and I was trying really hard on this piece. My goal was not to mix colors on my palette, but to mix them on the paper. So I just went straight with Graphite Gray, and I'm using it very, very lightly. I've put a lot of water in the little well, and I'm tapping on that. It soaks it up. Just, it will go dry in a hurry, but you do have to be careful because sometimes it does kind of allow you to dig down into the well. So barely tap it if you do it that way. Now you'll notice I'm adding some little petals in where I have no lines, and that was something that she did. She didn't necessarily use lines on everything. She came back and added some forms in that were just painted forms, and I think it makes these little flowers more delicate. I did a piece right before this one, I think my previous one, I had some flowers as well, and they were very delicate little flowers. I wish I'd had my brown ink for that, but they were delicate little flowers, and she used line to create that delicate form. Where these are more of a straight petal, the ones I did previously had some curves to the edges of the petals, and the way she used the weighted lines created that delicate form. But for this piece, she used just the watercolor to create those delicate areas on the flower for her. And this is absolutely not me realizing that I forgot to paint all of these little stems coming out of the water. So I'm going to be coming back and forth to that meadow and the slate green, and I'm going to be painting those in. They were a little more green at the top, and they got lighter at the bottom. So I'm just letting my brush, I'm starting at the top, and I'm just letting that color run out as I come down those little stems. And then we're going to finish these off with the yellow in the center on those flowers. And I really thought about this because if you've worked with the Graphitint, you can tell. If you haven't worked with it, you can tell on the screen that it is more of a muted paint. And the centers of these flowers were super bright yellow, so I'm thinking about it right here. And I thought about pulling out the ink tints and coloring those in, but decided, nope, I'm going to stick with the Graphitint, so that's what we did. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this piece. I hope you will join me for the next one as well. If you work with Graphitint, please tell us down below if you have any tips or tricks, or if you have any questions about it, put that down below as well. I'm always happy to hear from you guys. I do hope you will join me for future pieces in this series, and until then, I will see you in the next one.